That was partly why. The other part was that, even on a sunny day, the woods beyond the stile were too dark and too quiet. A tunnel of green, with the threat of the unseen drop on one side and tangled undergrowth rising on the other. The pixies in the woods would lead you in circles, even right off the cliff if they could. You'd have to turn your coat inside out to keep them away. At the foot of the Clovelly path was a small stone beehive-shaped hut. They didn't know what the hut was supposed to be for, but they called it the bear den, because even in the dry it smelled like bears. The children took turns to squeeze through the tiny door and sit in the dark, with their knees tucked under their chins, for as long as they could stand it. Adam held the record, which was ages. To the east, the peppercomb path was even steeper, a switchback of mud and wooden planking in a makeshift staircase between clinging brambles. Halfway up was the haunted house, where they weren't allowed to go. They spent much of their time there, picking among the cinders in the fireplaces and knocking glass from the empty windows at low tide, to hear it tinkle on the wet pebbles 100 feet below. Each year, the worm-chewed floor jutted out further and further over the disintegrating drop. There was one place where Ruby could lie, with her eye to a knothole in the floor, where there was nothing between her and the dark grey sea. It was like flying, or falling. Ruby Trick lived in a tiny 2-bedroomed cottage called The Retreat. It was owned by a family in London who had bought it and named it, and then found it was too distant, too dreary, too damp to retreat to, even just once a summer, and had rented it out until they could sell at a profit. That was never going to happen. The retreat would cost less to demolish and rebuild than it would to repair. Ruby's father, John Trick, hammered bits of scrap wood into draughty window frames and slapped filler at the widening cracks in the walls, but each year the retreat fought a losing battle against nature. The forest didn't want them there. That was plain to Ruby. While Clovelly kept it at bay with size and industry, and ultimately brute tourism, Limeburn was just in its way. The stream and the road and the thin line of houses were never going to be enough to keep the trees on this side of the coombe joining the trees on that side. It was only a matter of time. The advance party was already established. Ferns sprouted from stone walls like little green starfish, while rhododendrons and hydrangeas crowded back doors and shrouded rear windows. And even as the trees surrendered their branches to loppers and chainsaws, so they tunnelled sly roots under enemy lines, breaking through pipes, loosening foundations, and shifting walls out of true. In Rock Cottage, the living room floor had bulged and finally splintered to reveal a root of oak as thick as a man's leg. They'd all been in to look, and to help old Mrs. Vanston rearrange the furniture around it. John Trick always said there were some things you just couldn't stop. Already the houses further up the hill had been swallowed by the forest, their stone hearths now washed with rain, and home only to spiders and bloated toads, while the houses that were left had nowhere to go but the sea, which gouged relentlessly at the cliff beneath them. The long, curved slipway tempted the water up into the village, and sometimes it came. During spring tides and storms, sandbags were packed tight behind wooden slides in the doorways, and people took their heirlooms and TVs up to bed with them, just in case. By day, it was easy to forget that the trees and the ocean were lying in wait. By day, the children played in the woods and stepped gingerly across the giant pebbles on the beach to paddle in the rock pools. But by night, Ruby could feel the tides tugging at her belly, while the forest tested the retreat, squealing against the glass and tapping on the tiles. And she wondered what it would be like when the outside finally broke in.